point of creation is a heavenly society, both in the spiritual realm and in the material, at least according to what I believe is the great mystic Emanuel Swedenborg. Now, there are many great mystics throughout time, people who come and teach us profound wisdom, insight into human nature, the human brain, love, even just nature. Sages come and teach us about many different things. But Emanuel Swedenborg, for me, stands out because not only did he write extensively in the scientific realm throughout his career as a scientist, not only did he create the genesis of many of our ideas about the brain, such as neuronal theory, or many ideas about the solar system, or many ideas about psychology. Jung was a great fan of Swedenborg. Swedenborg also shared what I believe was the heart, the root of many of the spiritual ideas that are good within the Enlightenment, within the Transcendentalist movements, within New Age thought, especially. Yes, Swedenborg was a Christian mystic who, funny enough, believed that all peoples, all types of religion, for the most part, go to heaven. I'm sure there's some guy out there who creates his own religion. He's not interested in heaven. He'd rather dominate and control people in hell for the rest of the time, or at least for, another 100 years. Who knows? Because Swedenborg, yes, also believed that hell was a place of our own making, yes, in connection with other quote unquote evil spirits, but it was a place that we felt like we loved in the spiritual realm. And as we are exposed to our neighbors, so to speak, we might find that we're not so in love with hell as we thought. And so Swedenborg's a good place to go. A guy who has been quoted by many Nobel laureates, by many tremendous scientists, people who've come up with amazing things in almost every field. When it comes to the point of creation, he's a good guy to ask, well, why is anything anything? He said something interesting about why creation exists. He believed it was to create you in the image and likeness of God. Funny enough, Genesis 1 is the point of creation. And it's also the point of why everything in society and in physics and in community, in technology, everything works the way it does. So on the smallest level, we have disparate energetical, we call them particles, we call them waves. They're neither, obviously. Waves is a function of how something moves, right? A particle, at least in physics, is something that happens microscopically fast, and then it's never a particle again until, that microscopic second where it is, right? And so both are actually just descriptions of behavior, and yet we like to think that's what matter is. Whereas in reality, it's more simple than most of us would believe. But we'll get there. In a way, you could say the material realm expresses community on a microscopic level. We know there are particles because we're, or whatever you want to call them, because we're made of them, right? We can interact with them, we can test them, that's how we know they're there. Things become more interesting the more variety of these particles get together, and the bigger the structures. No two atoms are the same. That's crazy, right? No two atoms are exactly the same. even two entangled protons are in different places, right? And so it's interesting that we have this type of community on the base level of existence. These things come together and make a quark, let's say. These quarks and other things come together to make, let's say, a photon. These photons and what have you come together and make a proton, an atom, a molecule. Then we start calling it a rock or a substance, a liquid, a gas. And then those things come together, we call it an asteroid, a planet, a star, a solar system, a galaxy, a local cluster, a big part of the universe, right? And on every level, we see these beautiful waves of community making, beauty. And because we have that at the smallest level, we have community making on the human level. You and me can sit here reflecting about how the kingdom of heaven is apparent in every level of creation. It's just the way it is. Now, unfortunately, when we get into the weeds of what makes something grow, we come to the need for friction, the need for what we call evil, for decomposition, for things falling apart, sometimes seemingly on purpose. And yet, in human history at least, we see how some of the most dastardly acts can eventually be used for learning, for good, for nobility, nobility of spirit. We have some of the most beautiful poetry and books out of Holocaust. But even more so, we have that vision of never again. And when that vision stands firm, we have the greatest examples of uh, heroes that we could ever imagine. Now, today, we can get lost in the weeds of this friction. As the pearl or as the clam, right, we're bothered by the sand that's making us bigger, making the pearl, making us better. Because it can be hard to see the pearl. That's just what's coming from this really um, intrusive piece of sand. And in fact, as we wrap this piece of sand with our need to grow, our need to get space from someone, our need for good health care, for good psychological care, for good spiritual care, we can, naturally keep focusing on the root of the problem, or what we think is the root of the problem. And in a way, we're right to point it out, because a lot of what causes issues today hasn't seen the sun in a long time. When it's seen the sun, we call them conspiracy theories, those ideas. And yet, when we totally focus on the negative, we lose the pearl. At least feels like it, right? When we totally are consumed by that thing that no one else knows about, or maybe people know about it, but no one's doing anything about it, that can be just as frustrating, right? We're missing the pearl of creation, the pearl of our lives. That peace that comes from having to grapple with that a couple nights ago, and coming to a place where we found some wisdom, found some love. Sometimes when we encounter that person we hate so much, maybe we hear their story honestly, we hear their whole story, and we have compassion for how much they've gone through, because unfortunately, some of our biggest quote unquote villains have gone through terrible things that most people will never understand, see, or hear. Because unfortunately, often what's hidden are those personal traumas, those things that have fueled disparity, those things that have fueled evil in our world. Those things are often relegated to basements, bedrooms, and closets. And so, yes, there's the sand, right? But it's up to us to be more sand for other people. And sometimes we're set upon. According to uh, many things, we have programs on the government level of many nation states that are creating monsters, let's say. You can read into that how you will. But we know this, right? We know our governments are often doing terrible things with military folks, forcing them to do terrible things. Sometimes they don't know why they're doing it, what they're exactly doing. Sometimes they do know that if they don't do it, they're killed, their families are killed. This happens in countries, right? May or may not happen in yours or mine. But we know this exists. And the better a country is at doing that, the more secretive it is about doing it. The worse they are, the more obvious everyone knows, right? We condemn them on a world stage, they eventually get assassinated or what have you. No, some of our worst actors are really good at keeping secrets for that reason, exactly. But as the Lord said, I do everything in the light, and you do what you do in the darkness, hidden, secret. And so we are called as human beings with a world full of sand, but carrying a lot more pearl, if you'll believe it, to lean in on shining into the pearl. Lean into accepting the reality of the greatness that's come from whatever bad history. And although our tendency can be to focus again on this bad and that bad, or just to shut it all out and say, well, I'm into sports, okay? Or I'm into TikTok, or I'm into whatever. It's actually best to accept the reality of a situation and the possibility that it's worse than we think, much worse perhaps, while also continuing to return to how amazing the pearl is. Not using one to dismiss the other. That would be false. That would be fake. Because indeed, they're inextricably, did I say it right? Linked. They're linked. And in fact, the more we can shine light on both the pearl and the sand, the more power the good has. Because shining a light on something, being open to something in our minds, being agreeable enough to say, you know what, maybe not all other religions are terrible. Maybe God's speaking through people in other ways. Yes, allowing for other people to have their pearls too. It's okay. Christ is the way, the truth, the life. Muhammad is the ultimate prophet. Krishna is God incarnate. So is Shiva. So is everyone, perhaps. Maybe some part of everyone. Well, at least we can agree all the good is from God. Does that mean male and female? Well, I heard those were both made in God's likeness. I hear some female things are pretty good. I heard some male things might be okay too. So maybe there's some God in both, right? The more we're willing to do that, the more it is. The more. The more we see heaven for what it is. We see God for what He is, what she is, what we are, what the one life. It's one life. Can't pull life from the rest of life. Try to pull someone out of the universe, and you just get another part of the universe, another dimension, full of life. There's no way to cut life off from itself. Now, for those who believe they love destruction and hurt and harm, for those minds distorted enough to be super addicted to it, right? There is a level of death coming because it's already there. That is death itself. There's a level of, let's call it withering, right? Hopefully coming to each part of our minds that love destruction of other people, that love ourselves so much that anyone else can go burn, right? That part of my thinking, if it exists, should burn. I think it makes sense. In fact, that part of our thinking, especially with things going the way they're going, is going to find itself really hard pressed to find a breath. And although that sometimes, seems debatable, right? We all know that in our own lives, we've run into tough situations where that part of us that is always worried is that tipping anxiety is uh, blown this way and that way and just scattered. Um, that angry part of us is just triggered, and it can feel like we don't have any control. And that's why returning to some of our ideas about creation is important. That perhaps the point of creation is God made manifest both physically and spiritually in community. Then we start to see that, perhaps this part of me that doesn't behave like it's part of any type of heavenly paradise is a passing thing. It's something I'm watching. Maybe this sense of myself that's so obsessed with this thing that I keep doing that I don't think is healthy isn't really me. Maybe I'm just seeing that me, right? Because we can see ourselves do something and then we can see ourselves do something. Like I can watch myself walk down the road, just walking down the road, or I can kind of notice that I'm a person with an idea of themselves walking down the road. When we start to get that kind of breath, that openness to see the pearl of our bodies, to see the pearl of our minds more, not totally identified with it, but taking a step back, we might find we have more freedom from that position. Oh, I watch myself fall into that again and again, not just seeing myself fall into it, but actually seeing that sense of myself that thinks it needs that. It can be a little heady at times, but we all know what it's like to feel a sense of self. We all know what it's like to be like, well, I'm up to it again. And so just realizing that that's a mode of mind, not ourselves. It's coming like a cloud. Might come a lot. We live in a stormy area, but it's still just passing. And it's not really us. It's actually the thing that maybe was given to us thanks to genetics, thanks to traumatic past, thanks to so many things come together. Perhaps God needed a little bit of sand in your life. And so today we're blessed to be the pearl with the sand. And funny enough, I think our planet has maybe more sand than most. So, biggest pearl ever? You better believe it.